Okay, friends, the last time we saw Bryce and Edward, Edward unfortunately was kind of slammed against the counter in Neil's diner by Neil, and we heard a big crack. And then the author kind of put in a dream sequence of Edward coming back to see all the people he loves and wishing he could be with Sarah Ruth. But all of his friends are telling, no, you have to stay here. So let's find out what happens in chapter 23. "Exceedingly well made," said the man, who was running a warm cloth over Edward's face. "A work of art. I would say a surpassingly, unbelievably dirty work of art, but art none the less. And dirt can be dealt with, just as your broken head has been dealt with." Edward looked into the eyes of the man. "Ah, there you are," the man said. "I can see that you're listening now. Your head was broken. I fixed it. I brought you back from the world of the dead." "My heart," thought Edward, "my heart is broken." No need to thank me," the man said. "It's my job, quite literally. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Lucius Clark, doll mender. Your head? May I tell you? Will it upset you? Well, I always say the truth must be met head on, no pun intended. Your head, young sir, was in 21 pieces. 21 pieces? Edward repeated mindlessly. Lucius Clark nodded. 21, he said. All modesty aside, I must admit that a lesser doll mender, a doll mender without my skills, might not have been able to rescue you. But let's not speak of what might have been. Let us speak instead of what is. You are whole. You have been pulled back from the brink of oblivion by your humble servant, Lucius Clark. And here Lucius Clark put his hand on his chest and bowed deeply over Edward. This was quite a speech to wake up to, and Edward lay on his back trying to absorb it. He was on a wooden table. He was in a room with sunshine pouring in from high windows. His head apparently had been in 21 pieces and now was put together into one. He was not wearing a red suit. In fact, he had no clothes on at all. He was naked again, and he did not have wings. And then he remembered Bryce, the diner, and Neil swinging him through the air. Bryce. You are wondering, perhaps, about your young friend, the one with the continually running nose? Yes, he brought you here, weeping, begging for my assistance. Put him back together again, he said. Put him back together. I told him, I said, young sir, I'm a businessman. I can put your rabbit back together again for a price. The question is, can you pay this price? He could not. Of course he could not. He said that he could not. I told him then that he had two options, only two. The first option being that he seek assistance elsewhere. Option 2 was that I would fix you to the very best of my considerable abilities, and then you would become mine, his no longer, but mine. Here Lucius fell silent. He nodded, agreeing with himself. Only two options, and your friend chose option 2. He gave you up so that you could be healed. Extraordinary, really. Bryce, thought Edward. Lucius Clark clapped his hands together. But no worries, my friend, no worries. I fully intend to keep my end of the bargain. I will restore you to what I perceive to be your former glory. You shall have rabbit for ears and a rabbit for tail. Your whiskers will be repaired and replaced, your eyes repainted in a bright and stunning blue. You will be clothed in the finest of suits. And then, some day, I will reap my return and my investment in you. All in good time. All in good time. In the doll business, we have a saying, there is real time and there is doll time. You, my fine friend, have entered doll time. Chapter 24. And so Edward Tulane was mended, put together again, cleaned and polished, dressed in an elegant suit, and placed on a high shelf for display. From this shelf Edward could see the whole shop, Lucius Clark's workbench, and the windows to the outside world, and the door that the customers used to enter and leave. From this shelf, Edward saw Bryce open the door one day and stand on the threshold, the silver harmonica in his left hand flashing brilliantly in the sunlight, flooding in through the windows. "Young sir," said Lucius, "I'm afraid that we made a deal." "Can I see him?" asked Bryce. He wiped his hand across his nose, and the gesture filled Edward with a terrible feeling of love and loss. "I just want to look at him." Lucius Clark sighed. You may look, and then you must go and not come back. I cannot have you in my shop every day mooning over what you've lost." "Yes, sir," said Bryce. Lucius sighed again. He got up from his workbench and went to Edward's shelf and picked him up and held him so that Bryce could see him. "Hey, Jangles, you look good. The last time I seen you, you looked terrible. Your head was busted in and—" "Well, he is put together again," said Lucius, "as I promised you he would be." Bryce nodded, and he wiped his hand across his nose. "Can I hold him?" he asked. "No," said Lucius. Bryce nodded again. "Tell him good-bye. He is repaired. He has been saved. Now you must tell him good-bye." "Good-bye," said Bryce. "Don't go," thought Edward. "I won't be able to bear it if you go." "And now you must leave," said Lucius Clark. "Yes, sir," said Bryce, but he stood without moving, looking at Edward. "Go," said Lucius Clark. "Go." "Please," thought Edward, "don't." Bryce turned. He walked through the door of the doll-mender's shop. The door closed, the bell tinkled, and Edward was alone. Chapter 25. Technically, of course, he was not alone. Lucius Clark's shop was filled with dolls, lady dolls and baby dolls, dolls with eyes that opened and closed, and dolls with painted-on eyes, dolls dressed as queens, and dolls wearing sailor suits. Edward had never cared for dolls. He found them annoying and self-centered, twittery and vain. This opinion was immediately reinforced by his first shelf-mate, a china doll with green glass eyes and red lips and dark brown hair. She was wearing a green satin dress that fell to her knees. "What are you?" she said in a high-pitched voice when Edward was placed on the shelf next to her. "I'm a rabbit," said Edward. The doll let out a small squeak. "Oh, you're in the wrong place. This is a shop for dolls, not rabbits." Edward said nothing. "Shoo!" said the doll. "I would love to shoo," said Edward, "but it is obvious I cannot." After a long silence, the doll said, "I hope you don't think anyone is going to buy you." Again Edward said nothing. "The people who come in here want dolls, not rabbits. They want baby dolls or elegant dolls such as myself, dolls with pretty dresses, dolls with eyes that open and close." "I have no interest in being purchased," said Edward. The doll gasped. "You don't want someone to buy you? You don't want to be owned by a little girl who loves you?" Sarah, Ruth, Abilene. Their names went through Edward's head like the notes of a sad, sweet song. "I have already been loved," said Edward. "I have been loved by a girl named Abilene. I've been loved by a fisherman and his wife, and a hobo and his dog. I have been loved by a boy who played the harmonica, and by a girl who died. Don't talk to me about love. I have known love," he said. This impassioned speech shut up Edward's shelf-mate for a considerable amount of time. "Well," she said at last, "still, my point is that no one is going to buy you." They did not speak to each other again. The doll was sold 2 weeks later to a grandmother who was purchasing for a grandchild. "Yes," she said to Lucius Clark, "that one right there, that one with the green dress, she's quite lovely." "Yes," said Lucius, "she is, isn't she?" And he plucked the doll from the shelf. "Good-bye and good riddance," thought Edward. The spot next to the rabbit stayed vacant for some time. Day after day the door to the shop opened and closed, letting in early morning sun or late afternoon light, lifting the hearts of the dolls inside, all of them thinking when the door swung wide that this time This time, the person entering the shop would be the one who wanted them. Edward was the lone contrarian. He prided himself on not hoping, on not allowing his heart to lift inside of him. He prided himself on keeping his heart silent, immobile, closed tight. I am done with hope, thought Edward Tulane. And then one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. That's where we'll stop. Next time we'll find out about this new doll and her relationship with Edward. So we're learning now that Edward has been repaired. He's back to his former glory. He looks fantastic. He looks great. But he's really not happy, right? He's not happy. And he's missing, very much so, the people that he loved, which is a really big change from the first couple chapters when he was missing his clothes or his hat or his pocket watch. Now he's actually missing the people that he loved. So his character has made a very big transition. And next time we'll finish the story.